my talk. Let me just give you a little synopsis about my life. I hope you don't find this too boring. I'm 45 years old. I've been in working for 23 years. I studied electrical engineering at Cornell, and I've been basically in the computer industry since that time. So I've got a few years under my belt, hopefully a few years more to go. I started my career at Intel. Now this was back in 79, 80, and 81. I was there for 3 years, and I actually got to see a really interesting transition there. This is when they were basically being clobbered and killed in the memory business, which is what their business was, and we're moving into the microprocessor business, which hadn't really happened yet. And this was a very difficult time for them, and it was an interesting transition to go through, so that was something I learned back then. I then went to join a startup company. I wasn't one of the founders. I didn't design the product. It was Grid Systems. Grid invented the laptop. They really invented the laptop. They were the first people to make a computer where the screen folds over the keyboard. They got a patent on that. I joined them not in engineering, but in a marketing role, actually, a training and marketing role. But I helped them launch that product, and that was a company that struggled. They never could fail, and it was either like put them out of their misery or just make them successful. But no, they just kind of hung in there for quite a number of years. They were really doing a really hot, creative idea, but the people who founded that company came out of the mini computer business, and so the softer thoughts they had were sort of mini computer thoughts, and they didn't kind of miss the beginning wave of the PC revolution. But it was interesting to be there. I was there on and off almost for a total of 10 years until 1992. During that time, I actually created my first product, which is an entrepreneurial effort in its own right. I convinced the company that they ought to go into a new business. They ought to, let me run the whole thing. They ought to let me create it and build it. And this was in the late 1980s, and it was the first pen-based computer that really came to the market. I didn't call them pen-based computers, but that's what it was. I brought one with me. What happened to my bag? Right here. I'm not going to bring all the products that I've made over my lifetime, but this is the first one I designed. This is the Grid Pad, and I thought you'd like to see it because this was state-of-the-art at one time. Not that long ago, 14 years ago, I guess. We had reasonable success with this. We actually built a business at its peak was about $30 million a year around 10 years ago, which wasn't too bad. But I did that under the auspices of Grid, and it wasn't really a startup, but it was in many ways entrepreneurial within that company. In 1992, I got the idea. Well, some people told me about the idea, and I thought it was a good one. They said, "Hey, we like these things. This is pretty cool, but can you make one that's a lot smaller and more personal?" And then I got this bug at that time. And the bug, I started realizing, I had this sort of thought about personal computing in general. I said, you know what? All personal computing ought to be small, and ought to be reliable, and ought to be cheap and inexpensive and use less power and not require IT staff to run and so on. And I became convinced, and I still believe this, that the future of personal computing, if you think about the world and 6 billion people on it, the future of personal computing had to be something much smaller and simpler than what we had at that time, that what we typically consider a personal computer today. And so I started on the path of trying to accelerate that. Not that the world needed me to do that, but I said, gee, maybe I can help out, and we can accelerate it and make some good products. And that was the genesis of Palm Computing.